Coming up on episode 181 of Creative Writing, I'm talking about how to position your book for better sales.
I can't go back to sleep, it's almost light. These restless thoughts have kept me up again tonight.
Hello and welcome to Creative Writing. I'm your host, Kirsten Oliphant, and this is the podcast for you, an author who wants to sell more books without being smarmy. And selling books is exactly what we're going to be talking about today in, I guess, a little mini-series, kind of. We're going to talk about writing to market this month. That's what my workshop is on. That's happening April 15th. You can find out more if you go to creativewriting.com/workshop. And we're going to talk today about how to position your book for better sales. And I'm really excited about this topic. Before we get into it, I wanted to first just to give a shout out to Jasmine Commerce of JasmineCommerceMusic.com. She is the lovely voice that you hear at the beginning and end of every episode. And I usually say this at the end of the episode, but I keep having people ask. So I'm thinking people aren't listening to the end. And sometimes because I really don't do the podcast with a script, every so often I forget like important details, like asking you to sign up for my email or telling you who sings the music for the show. So you can check out Jasmine Commerce at JasmineCommerceMusic.com. And if you want the show notes for this episode, I've got some links and other things there. You can go to creativewriting.com/181. So as also a little caveat, I'm recording this during the day with all my kids and husband all home, dog. It might get loud. We're just going to do the best we can, as we are all doing during this time of social distancing. And if you haven't listened to episode 180, there's no show notes for it, but it was what I feel like is a really important and encouraging message that during this time where everything is uncertain, difficult, we're all adjusting, it's still important to get your voice out there. And so I'm continuing to come to you with the podcast as much as I'm able. I'm still writing. I'm still hoping to help you guys learn how to better market your book. So let's talk about that today. And I've talked about writing to market before. In fact, episode 174 talks about writing to market. And I'm also going to kind of reference some things I've talked about in episode 150, which is all about niching down. But writing to market first, before we get into the positioning part and what I want to really hone in on today, writing to market is not just a way of selling yourself out to make money. I think there's a really bad stigma. And if you've been around for a while, hopefully you've heard me dispel this, but writing to market, really, all it is writing books and positioning your books in a way that meets the reader expectations. Happy readers matched up with exactly the kind of book they want to read. And we all want that. So it can look really different if you're writing to market and you're writing literary books. That's still writing to market. Okay. It's not just writing to market it's not just like a way of trying to make quick sales or doing something sleazy. It's just a way of writing and positioning books that reach the people you want to reach and make those readers happy. Now, there's two parts to it, really. There's the writing and craft of the book itself to the market you're aiming towards. And then there's the positioning and marketing. And we're going to go on that second part today, which seems out of order, but I think often I get this question where someone has already written a book, and you guys may be there. You already have a book idea. You've already started writing a book, and you haven't thought about this marketing stuff at all. You haven't thought about writing to market or where your book fits, or you've only thought about it in a general way. And I find that a lot of people are there. So this is for you guys if you already have a book idea, if you've already started writing a book, if you've already completed a book, and now you're hearing about this writing to market stuff and you're like, well, I don't know how to do this. So this episode is for you, really all about how you can take the book you've already written and better position it to get more sales and connect with those right readers. So this is kind of that second part of writing to market and the marketing and positioning bit of that. Now, in an ideal world, and with your next book, you're going to be thinking about the market before you write and as you write. That's not always the case, so that's what we're assuming today. But next time, the best option for you is to really consider the market before you dive into writing a book. It's figuring out where you want to go and where your book goes beforehand, and then you'll have that in mind as well as you are writing the book. But that's not where we are today. For today, we're assuming that you already have something you've written. Maybe it was an idea you had, maybe you already know somewhat of the genre, or maybe you just had a story idea you loved and you wrote it and now you're trying to figure out how the heck this whole writing to market thing fits. So It's really pretty simple, but it might be a little time consuming, but it's important time. And I really do believe that it will help your book sales it'll help your book actually sell. So the first thing you're going to need to do is research categories and niches. And again, this is where episode 150 comes into play, where I've talked about drilling down into the subcategories. But let me just talk a little bit about why this is important and how you can do it for free on Amazon. There's paid tools as well, but you can absolutely do this free on Amazon. It's a great place to kind of get lost and spend time researching. So when we're talking about genre, let's talk about like the big thing. Like, so say I tell you that I write romance. Okay, you already have an idea in your head what that means. Love stories, right? Or maybe you might have an image in mind. Like when I hear romance novel, I think of the secret stash of Harlequin romances we found in my grandma's house when we moved her. Oh my goodness. And I feel like there's a lot of us out there that have like grandma stories with these romance novels, but that's often what I think of. Romance is a huge category. So whatever you're thinking of, you might be thinking of a lot of different things. Romance is broken way down into other subcategories. Now, the big umbrella of romance, what we know from that is it's boy meets girl, it's just the love story, and it ends happily. That's generally what a romance is. But there are historical romances, and there's even like breaking it down in their Regency and then other kinds. And I don't like historical romance. I don't know all the kinds, but tons of different kinds of historical romances. And there's also steamy and clean. So there's romance novels that have sex in them that talk about that take place in historical times, and there's ones that take place in historical times without that in them. There's cowboy romance, there's romantic comedy, Christian romance, paranormal romance, and each of those little subcategories, they fit under the big umbrella of romance, but they all look really different. And they all, not really different, but they all have enough differences that it matters to the reader. Some readers, like I said, I don't like historical romance. I do like rom-com. And I found that I like American romantic comedies over British romantic comedies. So there's even some differences there. And in one of the groups I'm in there, we were talking about how books sometimes are marketed different, like a romantic comedy marketed towards the US might have a different cover than a romantic comedy would be in the UK. So there are a whole lot of ways to drill down into a specific category. And when you're on Amazon, you can start, like if you know you're going to do something sci-fi and fantasy, if you go up, I'm actually going to open up Amazon as I'm talking. So if you want to go and look up that kind of category, and it's going to take me a second to get there. Once you get to a certain book, like if you just search sci-fi books, I'm going to click on one of the first books I see. It's called Children of Time. It's not one I've read. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go down. You can find a book and scroll down and you'll see the categories. You'll see 3 of the categories it's listed in. And so this one is hard science fiction. So already we're in like a subcategory. So then when you look at what that's going to take you, I'm going to click on that. What that's going to take you to is it's going to take you to the bestseller list in that category. And if you're going to see on the screen, you're going to see the top 50 on that first page, and then you can click to see the next 50 in the top 100. But over on the left side, you're going to see this big list. It's kind of like a directory. You'll see, I'm seeing any department, Kindle store, Kindle ebook, science fiction and fantasy, science fiction, and then in bold, it says hard science fiction. So under science fiction and fantasy, you can choose, like if you just click on science fiction and fantasy, so I'm over on that left menu, I'm clicking on that, you'll see fantasy and science fiction. So they have the big category, sci-fi and fantasy, which are really different things, but okay, they're always put together. I'm going to click on science fiction, because that's where I just was. And then you're going to see all those little things. There's adventure, alien invasion, alternative history, anthologies and short stories, classic, colonization, cyberpunk, dystopian, first contact, galactic empire. You get the point. I'm halfway down the list. So these are all different sub niches. And every so often, if you click on one of those, you'll still even get a further breakdown of some options in there. So once you can get to one of these categories and get the list on the left side, you can totally go through and find not just the big area that you were trying to look for, the big category like romance, like you can go into romance and then you can go click, like if you click under fantasy under romance, that doesn't take you anywhere extra. But sometimes you'll get to somewhere where there's going to be another breakdown of even more subcategories. And so that's what you want to do. Okay, so if you go to, romance, now there's, So anyway, I could spend a lot of time. I'm going to stop looking at that now because I'm just going to keep talking about that. But overall, what you want to do is you want to do that. You want to go and look and spend some time clicking around on those categories, because what you're going to find is when you click on those categories, you're going to find even more places to drill down. And then you can look at those top 50 books. I would really stick to the top 20. You want to find ones that are indie authors if you're indie. If you're not indie, if you're going the traditional route, often this is going to be dictated by the publishers. Things even like the length of your book are going to be dictated. Whereas as an indie, you have a little bit more flexibility within there. And so there's going to be a bit more of a range. So you can find that information every time you click on a book. You can go scroll down and you'll find information on that book's sales page, and you can find the publisher and things like that. So that's where you find that information. But what you're going to do if you're indie is you're going to look at those books in the top 20 or top 50 of a category that are also by indie authors. And you're going to look at things like the cover. You're going to look at things like the blurb. So you're actually spending a lot of time first finding the category where you think you fit. And so once you're kind of looking in a category, like maybe you're going to identify, because a book might fit in a few categories that are similar to each other, because you're going to be able to choose a couple categories anyway on Amazon, up to 10, but you're going to want to drill down to find the ones that really most fit your book. And then look at those categories to see the covers, to see the blurbs, to see even things like the reviews and what people are saying. And once you've found a couple of those, the next step is you're going to spend some time reading in that niche, because what you want to make sure is that your book actually aligns the way that you think that it does. And this is really important. And I've talked about this on the show before, but I made some big mistakes when I started out writing clean romance, in that I assumed I knew what it meant. And I even made assumptions about romance that were wrong. And so I really had not done my homework and really quickly figured that out and steered back into the direction, or not back, but steered into the direction I needed to go. What I did is I was reading books in a bigger category of romance. I was looking at the clean and wholesome category, which is a vast mix. Like you'll find things like Nicholas Sparks in there, and he'll say even that he's not writing romance. His books don't always have that happy ending that romance readers really do require. I was also checking out traditional books that fit into the clean and wholesome category, which are vastly different than the indie books that fit into the clean and wholesome category. So I really needed to drill down. And on Amazon, you can't really drill down once you get to clean and wholesome. There's not anything under that. But what I learned the longer I spent kind of in there is other categories that were related. Like there's inspirational romance and Christian romance and those kinds of areas, which are clean and wholesome. So some of those books, like as I clicked around in the clean and wholesome category, and I was looking to see other categories they were listed in, I would see other categories that were sub niches, but weren't necessarily underneath in terms of like when you're clicking over on that Amazon, display and list of different categories. But I would find smaller categories and was able to really check there, because the thing is with all of these is there are really subtle differences. There's a difference, in clean and wholesome, you'll have cowboy romance, you'll have Christian romance, all within that clean category. And those all look a little bit different from each other as well. So you need to do some reading. And the more reading I did, the more I realized that the first book I published, which still did fine, and I give it away as a freebie, but it didn't really fit the way that I needed it to. It really didn't fit as well as I wanted it to. The more you read your genre, the more you're going to know if your book fits or not. And you might realize like, okay, I thought this is where I wanted to position my book, but it really doesn't quite belong here. And so maybe you'll find a better category. And the reality is, if you've written your book without thinking about market, you may be in the position that it's just going to be harder to market that book. You may just find that it's harder to find a little category. It's harder to know. Maybe you're writing something that's like general literary fiction, a lot harder to market just because it's a much broader category, and you're going to have a lot more traditional books in there that have these big marketing budgets. So that's okay if that's where you are. You're going to just do your best to position your book where you can. But if, again, the next time you write a book, the more you can think about this ahead of time, the easier it's going to be when it comes to the marketing stuff. So as you've researched, you've looked at categories, you've tried to drill down and find some of the smaller niches, then you've read some to make sure your book actually fits. The next thing you're going to do is be really practical with the cover and your blurb. These are the places where you're signaling to the readers, hey, here's what kind of book I'm writing. Here's the book you're looking for. We are often way more subconscious than we realize. We have things that trigger us in ways that we're not always aware of. Like you may go on thinking you're looking for one kind of book, but the signals that different covers send you really may not be as overt as you realize. Like you may not be thinking, oh yes, I want this shirtless cowboy here, although that may be exactly what you're looking for. But we do connect emotionally and subconsciously, and there are signals and triggers being sent through book covers and through blurbs that we are not always even aware of, which is why it's very important to make sure that you know your genre well and that your covers and your blurbs and the language that you're using is sending those triggers. You're saying it overtly. And I've seen actually a lot of times in blurbs now, people will say specific things. I'm going to click on a book and see if this happens in there. When you're looking at a book listing, often now at the bottom of the blurb, people will say something like, okay, I clicked on a book called Vicious by L.J. Shen, which is a bestseller. And it says, Vicious is a complete standalone and part of the Sinners of Saints series. That sends overt signals. It's telling you it's a romance you can read without reading the other books in a series, which is important because readers want to know when they see a series if you have to read it in a particular order. So it tells you it's part of a series, but it can be read as a standalone. And so because it's in romance, what people are going to assume is there's going to be a happy ending in that book because it says you don't have to read the next book. So as in this person's story will be complete here. So there's those overt signals, but also there are the signals being sent that are not overt in the kinds of language you use. So you want to use both wherever possible. And you can look again at the other books in your genre to see what language they're using overtly and what terms they're also using kind of in the blurb and in the language and how they have it set up. Is it first person? Is it third person? What does their hook look like at the top? Are they giving you two perspectives? Like in that one I just clicked on Vicious, they have a first person perspective from the guy and a first person perspective from the girl. I don't think you always have to do that, but that very literally tells the readers, okay, we're going to get both perspectives in this novel, the guy and the girl perspective. So even things like that are sending these signals overtly and covertly. So the subconscious is being reached, but also people looking for those signals are going to see them as well. You need to get those down as much as possible. So you need to be really looking at those covers. Again, if you're publishing traditionally, you're not going to get to worry about the covers or the blurb, probably. You might get to look at the blurb. You might get to approve the cover, but you're probably not going to have a lot of choice. If you're an indie, you really need to be looking at those indie covers. And the reason I always talk about this, it is important to know what the traditional covers look like, but traditional covers have the big cushion of a marketing budget that you don't have. I'm assuming that you don't have it. And so they can have covers that are a little bit more artistic, a little bit less clear in those signals that they send because they are able to send those signals in other ways. They're able to send those signals by being a book that has big ads behind it. They're going to be able to do it in a bookstore by paying for the spot where the book faces outward. I don't know if you guys knew that. That kind of blew my mind when I learned it. But when you go to a bookstore and you actually see books where the covers are facing you, those are paid for spots. Okay. Those are not the best books. Those are the books whose publishers paid more money to have those books facing outward. So you see the full cover, not the little spine of the book. We don't have that luxury. And so our books as indies really have to, at a glance, send those subconscious emotional signals to the reader so they know. Now, a warning about this. You don't want to trick people. I've seen this too, where an author will see a hot genre and so they try to, or hot trend or something, and they'll try to like reposition their book and jam it into there so that they can sell more copies. And that does not work. And here's the reason it doesn't work. If it happens to work in terms of sales, your reviews are going to be bad if you have positioned your book in a way that doesn't really fit. So you want to make sure that you're not trying to trick people. Again, writing to market is not the sleazy, tricky thing. It's a thing, again, you're trying to meet the reader's expectations. And as you position your book, you're communicating to the readers that you're going to meet their expectations. That's what it means. So you don't want to fake it. Don't shove your book into the wrong place because you're just going to get bad reviews. So to sum up, overall, what we're trying to do here is give readers the experience that they want. If you haven't written a book yet, you can start doing this before you write and as you write to make sure your book is matching up. If you've already written your book, doing this research, finding some different sub-genres and smaller niches is really important. You're going to read some books in there. You're going to see if your book fits. Maybe you can tweak your book a little to make it fit better. Or maybe you're going to find exactly the right place or think you know the place and realize it's somewhere else entirely. But even if you've already written your book, it's not too late. It may be a harder job. Your book may not fit into a category that's really amazing for sales, but you're going to be able to position it the best way possible. If you've already written your book, that's just your goal. If you've written it, you love it, you still want to publish it, you're just trying to position it in the best way possible to sell it. Again, I'm always a fan of knowing this beforehand, but that's just not where we all are. Like I wrote my first book and published it before I even learned about a lot of this stuff and started doing it, and my sales got better. So if you guys want more like this is exactly the kind of stuff we're going to go deeper on in the workshop that I'm running this month. And if you're listening past April 15th in 2020, the workshops are going to be available to purchase as replay. So you can find more information on the Writing to Market workshop if you go to creativewriting.com/workshop. And if you just want the show notes for this, to learn what you can from here, which is a bit more general than the detail we'll go into in the workshop, you can go to creativewriting.com/181 for the notes for this show. My goal in the podcast, in the free Facebook group, in the emails that I send is to help you guys to write great books for the right readers and to sell more copies, to make readers happy, to make you money, to do all of those things. I think this is a mutually beneficial place where authors are writing books that readers love. Readers are happy, authors are happy, everybody's happy. And right now, in this time, the more happiness, the better. I have found a ton of solace in books. My book sales are actually going really well, even though I've turned off some ads. I think there are a lot more people reading and reading digitally. So this is not we don't know what's going to happen. I haven't launched my next book, but I've got the most number of pre-orders I've ever had. And people are asking for the book. People are reading. So it is an uncertain time, but people need your voice. People need your words. Keep writing. Keep publishing. Okay? Okay. If you're not in the free Facebook group, you should join for some fantastic positive community. And you can find that at creativewriting.com/community. Thank you guys so much for listening. And now it's time for you to go out, create content that you love, and serve your people well.